around at St Matt's for a little while?
Yeah, we've been around pretty much since the launch as well, actually.
Yeah, great. That's good. So for those of you, if you've been around, you'll know that we've been going through a series, Back to Basics, over this term, looking at some of those core sort of principles of the Christian faith practices. It's the last in our series, and we're taking a slightly different tack today. We've been focusing quite a lot on practices, but actually we also want to remember some of the core truths that Scripture teaches us for the way in which we live in this world. Dan's been sort of, I think, itching a little bit for a while to come and share. I'll let you introduce yourself and what you do and all of that in a moment. But it's a privilege to have Dan and his experience and all that he brings into this topic of the climate change and why we should care about the world around us. And for many of us, there'll be sort of, we see that in the news. We don't necessarily know what to do about it or how to respond as Christians. So today's the day. Listen in, get some of the wisdom, and we can take that into our lives afterwards. Let's just say a quick prayer for Dan as he starts, and then I'll let you properly introduce yourself. Lord, thank you for this time together to hear from you and for all that Dan is going to bring today. Lord, would you bless him as he speaks, and would you bless each of us to listen up, to open our ears, to hear from you, but also to find really practical ways in which we might live out your call in our lives, especially in this area as we look at the world around us and how important it is. In your name, amen. Amen. Go for it, Dan.
Cool. Thank you, Mike. Morning, everybody. Good to be here with you this morning. And thanks for the introduction, Mike. So my name's Dan. I come to church with my wife, Teresa, and our 3 kids. And we love St. Matt's. We love it for its diversity. We love it for its energy. And we love it for its sense of family and community. So thank you for making this a really amazing place to come. As Mike said, I want to talk to you this morning about climate change. And I want to talk to you about how we should respond to this challenge of climate change from a place of our Christian faith. But a little bit more just about me before I jump into that. So I grew up not very far away from here, a few miles east along the coast, just near Mothercombe Beach. And I consider myself incredibly blessed to have grown up in that place. And what it instilled in me from a really early age was a love for the natural world and for God's creation. And that kind of stayed with me as I started choosing what I was going to study and what I was going to do for work. So I've got a background in plant sciences, and then I worked in supporting scientific research, biosciences and environmental sciences for most of my working life. And then a couple of years ago, I had a bit of a career change, and I started working with a small charity called Plymouth Energy Community, or PEC for short. And some of you might have come across PEC. It's an amazing little charity in the city that provides support and advice for people that are struggling with fuel poverty or experiencing fuel poverty. That's part of what they do. They also help communities to take ownership of their energy supply, and we install solar installations across the city, which then benefit those communities in which they're placed. A great little charity. And I just tell you that so that you've got a bit of awareness that I'm coming at this from a sort of scientific background as well as my Christian faith. So climate change is something that Teresa and I think about a lot. It's something which concerns us. It's something that frightens us sometimes. And we look around the world and we see, some action in this space, but not enough to reflect the urgency of the issue and the sort of statements that we're hearing from the top climate scientists on this subject. And so I wanted to come and talk to you a bit about that this morning. I wanted to talk to you about this challenge, and I wanted to talk to you about how I think as Christians we should be responding to it from a place of faith, and why I think that's so important that we lead by example in this area. So I'm going to dive in. We need a bit of a miracle to get through everything I want to say this morning, so pray for that. We better get on with it. So, if we can have the first slide. So what I did want to say as well is that I need to dive into the issue here a little bit. And actually, talk about the reality of the issue itself. So I need to do that, but then I want to try and weave through that and certainly come back to it strongly at the end, what this means to us from a place of Christian faith. And I know that some of what I'm going to say is quite alarming, quite distressing, and I know for some people it's quite anxiety-inducing, me included. So I just want to say that, right at the start, that as Mike has said, our God banishes fear. He's a God that casts out all fear, and a God that we can trust in and have hope in for anything that we're faced with, this included. So, I will come back to that, and we'll talk about hope and what this means from our faith perspective later on as I move through my slides. So there's two questions that I want to base this on. Why does it matter to us as Christians, and how should we respond? So I'll work through from that. So I wonder what you think of when you see this image. I wonder when the last time you saw it was, actually. It's quite amazing that we can go about our lives without thinking that this is where we're going about our lives on. This is where everybody who has ever lived. And it's just so extraordinarily beautiful, isn't it? And I think that's the first thing that always strikes me when I see this image. It's just, it's stunning. And the first verse that often comes to my mind when I look at this is this one from Romans. So apologies, some of my text is a little bit small, but I'll read out for you. So from the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly observed in what he made. And that really speaks truth to me. But what I'm also struck by often when I look at this image is actually how small the earth is. And I know, in some ways it's huge, it's vast. But in other ways it really isn't. I don't know if you've been on Google Earth recently, but you can start from this image and this kind of magnification, and then within 3 or 4 seconds you can zoom in and find your own house. And it takes 45 hours, I think, on a commercial flight, if you were able to do one, to circumnavigate the Earth. Not that I'd recommend that, given the context of what we're talking about this morning. But it's not, in some ways it's a big place, in other ways it really isn't. And the biosphere, which is the sort of zone around the planet where life actually exists, so the area of the atmosphere and of the Earth's surface where life exists, is actually incredibly thin. So if you took the Earth and you shrunk it down to the size of an apple, then the skin of that apple it represents the proportion of the Earth's space where life actually exists. So it is big, but it's also not very big, and it's finite, this is it. And then if we turn around and we look out into space in the opposite direction, we might see something like this. So this is an image taken from the James Webb Space Telescope, which is NASA's fancy new telescope that they launched in 2021. And all of the dots, most of the spots that you can see in this image, there are a few stars, but most of them are other galaxies. So all the gold and the orange and the white spots are other galaxies looking out into our universe. And what's totally mad about this image is that this represents a portion of the sky equivalent to a grain of sand held at arm's length. So you hold a grain of sand out at arm's length, and the bit of sky that's obscured by that grain of sand is what's represented in this image. So, that's what we can see out beyond our planet in all directions. And each one of those galaxies has about 100 billion stars in it, and at least as many planets. So it's vast. Now, why am I starting from this point? Why am I telling you this? Well, I think it's the point I'm trying to make is that it's very easy for us to go about our daily lives with all of the concerns and worries and loves, passions, fears that we have without really reflecting on this and thinking that actually the world has always been like this and it always will be like this, and there's nothing much that we can do to change that. But that's not the reality. The reality is we live on this small planet with a finite amount of resources, and there are 8 billion of us on this planet now, and we certainly can have an impact on it, and we can have a very significant and profound impact on the conditions for life on our planet. And that was the other thing I wanted to say, actually, is that, in all of that space, in all of that vastness, Earth is the only place that we are aware of where life exists. And the reason for that is that this is such a special place in terms of its physical and chemical sort of conditions for life. It's special and it's unique and it's very finely tuned. So what does that mean then? So next slide, please, if we could. So climate change is important because we're changing the conditions for life on our planet. And we're changing them fast, really fast, and we're changing them in ways that are irreversible. And that's impacting all life. Maybe a few bacteria around a hydrothermal vent somewhere I haven't noticed yet, but every other aspect of life is being affected by climate change. And humans are causing this. We're causing it through the release of greenhouse gases that we're emitting into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide, nitrous oxides, methane primarily, and through the burning of fossil fuels. Okay. And you may be familiar with this graph. This is the only graph I'm going to show you. I'm not going to get deep into lots of figures or charts. But this shows carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere over the last 800,000 years. So we start on the far left of the graph, 800,000 years ago, and there's a fluctuation in carbon dioxide levels. But never do they go above 300 parts per million in all of that time, until we get to the Industrial Revolution, and we see this spike up to current levels, which are now 420 parts per million. And the temperature of the atmosphere has followed that. So over the last few decades, we've seen a real, massive increase relatively in climate temperatures. And we're now at, we've just had the hottest year on record, 2023. And what does this mean? So what it means is, in the near term, the most immediate impacts of climate change are these severe weather events that we hear about and we see in our news. So catastrophic storms, much more frequent, much stronger, and more impactful. Severe flooding related to them. Rising sea levels. Hundreds of millions of people are expected to be made homeless or displaced by rising sea levels over the next few decades. And devastating and widespread wildfires, droughts, and declining biodiversity, so species not able to cope with this change already, and species loss and extinction in lots of different ecosystems around the planet. And then so at a societal level then, this means a number of different things for how we operate and how we survive as a species. So it impacts on our ability to grow enough food. It impacts on our ability to access enough fresh water, our health through the impacts of intense heat, and actually as heat increases, the impacts of pollution within cities are more intense, so death rates go up as we get to summer months because of pollution and the impacts of pollution. Our homes, which are ill-suited to the changing climate. Wherever you live in the world, your home is designed to cope with a fairly narrow range of temperature fluctuations. And we start making big changes in climate conditions, then our homes are really badly suited to deal with that wherever we live. And then our societal systems, so this impacts on the ability of our health systems to function, and our government and law and order and work. I work with a lady that leads on sustainability for Devon and Cornwall Police. And she was telling me the other day that over the summer months, they look at the forecast because they know that as temperatures go up, crime rates go up. People misbehave more as the weather gets hotter. And so they're looking at climate change and looking at climate change models to understand what that might mean for crime rates, which I find extraordinary. So there's lots of different ways in which this impacts on how our society functions. And then population movement on an unimaginable scale. So Oxfam says that 20 million people a year are displaced by severe weather events at the moment. And that's only going to climb. 20 million people a year. Sorry, very small text on this one. I was forgetting how small the screens were. So the impacts of climate change aren't felt equally around the world. And our country hasn't felt the impacts of this very much yet at all, but plenty of places around the world are feeling this. But as we go into the future, actually, that equality is even more pronounced, or inequality is even more pronounced. So don't get me wrong in what I'm about to say, because I recognise there's great inequality in our own country, and there's great poverty and really cutting poverty in our country as well. But nevertheless, we have a better chance in developed countries to be able to afford to adapt our homes. We have the buying power to compete for food resources as they become scarcer. We have robust systems of governance and healthcare that can handle this challenge. But for so many people in the world, that isn't the case. People live in such vulnerable circumstances around the rest of the world, and they are already suffering massively from the impacts of climate change, and they're only going to suffer more. And this is really only the beginning of these impacts. And then there's also great inequality in terms of the responsibility for this issue in the first place. So the richest nations of the world have contributed most to this problem, but are going to suffer least. So the average person living in the UK is responsible for about 10 tons of carbon dioxide emissions a year. 10 tons, it's a crazy figure, isn't it? The average person living in Africa is responsible for about one ton of carbon dioxide a year. And if you live in the United States, you're much further off the chart again. And these emissions come from food and from energy and from transport and from what we waste as well. All of the stuff that we buy and that we consume. And it's a fairly fundamental principle that the more wealth you have, the more you spend and you consume, and the higher the emissions are associated with your lifestyle. So, So recognizing all of that, why is it so important that we act now? Is it really that critical now? Well, climate scientists are telling us that the next few years are really critical for us to take action on this issue. We have a diminishing window of time to take some proper action on this. And as the climate warms, we pass these irreversible tipping points, and this is part of the danger. So things like the Arctic tundra melting, which releases huge amounts of methane into the atmosphere. And once that's released, there's no going back. We can't trap that again under the ice in the tundra. That then has a kind of runaway effect on the climate. So that's one of these tipping points are one of the reasons it's so critical that we have to take action soon. And we have to reduce our emissions now to limit this impact. So why then does this matter to us, particularly from a point of our Christian faith? Well, I hope as I've been talking there, you've already been thinking in your own mind about why this is important from your Christian faith. But these are the three areas that really stand out for me, particularly. So, number one is that God created all of us. He created all of us equal. He loves and cares about all of us equally. And he calls us to care for the poorest and the most oppressed and those who are suffering in this world. And this line from Psalm 82:3 sums that up. So defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and of the oppressed. So God calls us to look for the poorest and the most vulnerable and those who are suffering in our society, and to seek them out and to love and support and help them. And with climate change, we're not just talking about the people that are suffering in the world now. We're talking about the suffering that we're causing for generations to come, which is going to be even more intense and more pronounced. Secondly, a hunger for justice. So justice is integral to the character of our God. I love that line from the song, "Justice and mercy meet on the cross." God is about justice, he's about fairness, and he calls us to love justice too. So from Micah 6:8, It says it's quite simple. Do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love. So the fact that we see this injustice in terms of our lifestyles impacting on people on the other side of the world who are really vulnerable and are suffering from our consumption and our lifestyle should really, bite at our hearts as Christians particularly, and should call us to action. And then lastly, this is really significant for me personally, the stewardship of God's beautiful creation. God created this incredible universe and this beautiful planet, and then he put us on the planet to care for it and entrusted us with it. And he looked at his creation and he said, this is good, he delighted in it and he loved it. And when we treat it with disrespect, when we use it without any thought for its beauty or its capacity to sustain us or future generations, to me, that's incredibly disrespectful to God and to what he created and to what he made and what he loves. So we're called to be stewards. It's one of the 5 marks of mission of the Anglican Church, is to care for creation and to support and sustain life. And I love that. I think that's really powerful. And as with other areas of our Christian life, it isn't okay to say that our small actions don't make a difference. It's easy to feel like that, but actually, God isn't just looking at our actions. He's looking at the attitude of our hearts. And he cares about the attitudes of our hearts and the fact that we act from a place of faith and love, and that we take that action because it's the right thing to do. So we can't pretend this doesn't matter. We can't pretend that it isn't our problem. We need to take action because it's the right thing for us to do. And we've got a short video now, and there are a number of these on the Christian Aid website, and I think they're really good. They're short clips from people who are actually feeling the impacts of climate change in their world. So let's watch this one.
We used to cope with storms. We built coastal walls of stone, planted mangroves, and constructed houses in higher stilts. But these efforts had their limits. Now cyclones hit the Solomon Islands every season, powerful enough to cripple our economy overnight. With rising sea levels, our islands are sinking, some completely submerged, and with them, fundamental parts of our history, identity, and culture, trapped underwater, gone forever.
Climate change is often called the biggest injustice of our generation. The least developed countries like ours have emitted the tiniest fraction of the planet-warming gases that drive climate change. Yet, we are 5 times more likely to lose our lives from climate-related disasters.
Salt from the encroaching waves poisons our fresh water and forces people to travel great distances to find water for drinking and cooking.
Our coral reefs, home to thousands of marine species, are dying, and with them, the protein that sustains us. The losses we are experiencing from climate change are irreplaceable. This damage is irreparable. As our water and land disappears, whole communities are forced to relocate.
Some forced to squat illegally, exacerbating tensions between ethnic groups, which makes us afraid we will revisit the violent conflicts of the past that labeled our country a failing state.
We are worried about our country's future. Recognizing our deep and personal losses, governments must prioritize the climate crisis and agree a clear plan to address loss and damage that provides desperately needed support through finance and technology.
We must avert conflict and safeguard humanity. We cannot let climate change cause more states to fail. We must act now.
So if you're interested, you can find some more of those videos on the Christian Aid website. But I think they're really powerful for bringing home what this is actually meaning to people on the other side of the world. 5 times more likely to die from climate change if you live in a developing country. Okay, so what can we do? practically, what can we do? What steps can we take in our lives? Well, I've got a number of ideas here which represent some of the really the most impactful ways you can take action in your life, and some of them won't work for all of us. But pray about them and think about what it is that you can do in your life to make a difference. So, number one really is consuming less stuff. You know, everything we buy, everything we consume, everything we eat has a carbon footprint of some form. But in the West, we've become so used to buying so much, to having so much, to, you know, throwing away our white goods after a few years, buying a new telly because we feel like it. You know, there's so much consumption that we just kind of take for granted now in the way we live in the West. And when it comes to Christmas, you know, it gets even more intense, doesn't it? I was wandering around Smith's the other day and there were people just with shopping trolleys like literally things falling out of their trolleys because of the amount of stuff that they were trying to fit in to buy for Christmas. And it just, it saddens me that we feel we need to do that at Christmas. We started in our family. I know it's difficult. We've got kids. We want to give them a special Christmas. We've started in our family trying to think about grouping together as a family and buying just one or two things which are a little bit more special and maybe a bit more expensive, but are going to last and are a bit, just a bit more precious than 6 things that might end up at the recycling centre in 6 months' time. So we need to think about what it is we're buying and we're consuming. Consuming less meat and dairy. So, diet is a really big one, and meat and dairy are the really big, impactful aspects of our diet. And you don't have to cut it out completely, but anything you do to reduce your consumption of meat and dairy, it has quite a big impact on your lifestyle emissions. You can eat, meat produced just down the road is certainly less impactful from something reared in the Amazon. That is true. But you can ship vegetable protein from the other side of the world and that will still be significantly better than a burger that was produced half a mile down the road from where you live. So there's no getting away from the fact that meat and dairy are big contributors to climate change. Don't waste food. We're terrible at wasting food. Actually, the UK is the worst in Europe for wasting food. 40% of food globally never makes it into somebody's tummy. It's wasted between where it's produced and your fridge. So we need to try to do more to reduce our food waste. Consuming less fuel. So driving less, taking less flights. Or no flights if you're feeling really up for this. Turning your heating down. I know Mike and Roxy have bought a electric cargo bike that they love. Talk to them about that because they're massive fans of their cargo bike. We bought a little electric car, a second-hand, a few years ago. It's got a tiny range, but actually it's brilliant for 90% of the journeys we need to do. We love it. So think about whether you can make some of those changes in your life. Use ethical banks and finance. This is a massive one. Where you put your money has such an impact from your lifestyle, where you choose to invest your money. Choosing not just to look at the return you're going to get, but where it's being invested and what happens with that money is a really big deal. And then finally, putting pressure on our leaders, whether that's in our churches or political leaders as well. We need to be putting pressure on. So those are some of the things, but pray about them. And I know that some of these don't make sense for some of you and for some people. You know, Mike said earlier on about putting the heating on at this time of year. Sorry. Apologies. Chokes me up a bit straight away. That there are people. People in our city that have to choose between heat and food. So pray about what makes sense to you and what you can do in your life. We mustn't lose hope. Every small step that we take is having an impact somewhere and may have an impact on somebody's life somewhere. and on their suffering and alleviating their suffering. And this is an issue as well, something that's really inspiring for me and gives me hope, this is an issue that can pull the whole of the global church together. And I love that. And this next slide has an amazing statement which sums up everything I've tried to say this morning in a much more succinct fashion. So this is a statement from the Pope and Patriarch Bartholomew, who's the leader of the Orthodox Church, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. So this was a statement they released jointly in 2021, and it's really powerful. So they say, this is a critical moment. Our children's future and the future of our common home depend on it. We stand before a harsh justice. Biodiversity loss, environmental degradation, and climate change are the inevitable consequences of our actions, since we have greedily consumed more of the Earth's resources than the planet can endure. But we also face a profound injustice. The people bearing the most catastrophic consequences of these abuses are the poorest on the planet and have been the least responsible for causing them. For the sake of today's children, we must choose to eat, travel, spend, invest, and live differently, thinking not only of immediate interest and gains, but also of future benefits. We need to choose to live differently. So, yeah, as I promised, I think some of this can be quite gloomy if we're not careful. We don't come at it from a place of our faith. You know, there's no getting away from the fact that this is a big, scary issue, and it's easy, really, to react to that by turning away and burying our heads and just getting on with life as we always have. But I don't think we have that privilege as people of Christian faith. I think we should be leading by example. And what is so important is that we don't do that alone. You know, we have a God of faith and who is faithful to us, who never turns away no matter what the challenge that we're facing, and certainly doesn't turn away from humanity with this challenge. We have a God of peace and a God of hope and a God of love and compassion for us. The challenge is massive, but God is bigger. God made that universe that we're sitting in the middle of at this moment, that image that we looked at the beginning. That's his creation. And if he chooses to fix the climate on our little planet, that is perfectly within his power and his ability. So, yeah, we must have hope. And we must remember that, God is always there beside us and lifting us up. I love this verse from Romans, and this translation of the verse from the Message says, "Oh, may the God of green hope fill you up with joy, fill you up with peace, so that your believing lives filled with the life-giving energy of the Holy Spirit will brim over with hope." And I love that phrase, green hope, the idea that no matter how desperate the situation may seem, however much it may seem like we're in a barren place where life is threatened, God can always create green hope and new life from that. So let's have hope, church. I'd hope that you go away from this morning with three things, really. One is an awareness of this issue. Two is an enthusiasm and a desire to take action in your own life and to take action with others. Collectively as a church, we have quite a lot of power. As a worldwide church, we have a massive amount of power. So if Christians get on board with this issue, you know, we have huge potential to shape what's going on. And then lastly, that we remember that we have a God of hope and of love and of life, who wants us to pray to him, who wants us to ask him for his help in coming to this issue, and with our fears and anxieties, a God that casts out all fear and all anxiety from our lives. Okay, thank you. Amen.